and we're back again. We are in the home stretch, ladies and gentlemen. This is the moment we've all been waiting for. My top 20 favorite electronic albums of all time. Check out the previous 80 if you haven't already. I didn't make all those videos for nothing, you know. But let's just get right into it. Number 20. Bent. Programmed to Love. Here we have one of the more interesting sample-based albums I've ever seen, and certainly the dreamiest. There's chilled-out dream pop on here, there's some quirky up-tempo numbers, there's silly interludes, and everything comes out to be one of the most pleasant and refreshing listens I've ever come across, satisfying my musical sweet tooth while still giving my brain plenty to do. Number 19. Future Loop Foundation, Memories from a Fading Room. I don't know how Mark Barrett did it, but he created an album that hit all my nostalgia buttons on first listen. I discovered this guy through a series of flash games called Submachine, which I suggest you check out, although the tone of this album is near opposite to those of the games, this one being all happy and nostalgic as opposed to the bleak and inhuman tone of the games. But this album, I mean, it's weird and off-kilter in some areas, but triumphant and post-rockish in other ones, and it just gets me in the feels like very few other albums. Like stuff only higher up on this list. Guy is super underrated, go check him out. Number 18. Nightmares on Wax, Smoker's Delight. I've never smoked weed before, but I feel like I don't need to since this album exists. Funnily enough, I remember when I was a little kid and looking this guy up and seeing an album called Smoker's Delight made me think, uh-oh, does that mean listening to this will get me into trouble at school? Better stay away. Oh, if only I had checked it out then. It's one of the most relaxing, atmospheric, and detail-oriented sample-based albums ever, even making it beyond DJ Shadow himself for me. At least for right now. Number 17. Aphex Twin, Selected Ambient Works 8592. Yeah, the obvious choice to end all obvious choices. I have a feeling nearly every electronic music fan has this on their list somewhere, and for good reason. As one of the most influential releases of all time, having its sound continually copied by so many different artists, its atmosphere is no less captivating over 2 decades later. Not much else to say I didn't cover in the review, but believe it or not, it's only my second favorite IDM album of all time, right behind number 16, Mathematics, Mind Mushing Git. Sound-wise, Mind Mushing Git is not exactly a far cry from the formula set by the album I just got finished talking about, being all synthesizers, quite minimalistic and melody-driven. But the melodies have a sense of jazziness and funkiness to them. The synths seem dustier, and the atmospheric sounds spookier. And most importantly, the nostalgia factor is much stronger here than it is on 8592. Having been a Mathematics fan for much longer than I've been an Aphex Twin fan. In my opinion, it's Lee Anthony Norris's best work out of the many, many, many albums he's released over the years. Number 15. The Alan Parsons Project, I, Robot. This barely classifies as electronic, and I wouldn't consider any of the other APP albums electronic, but this is close enough, and I absolutely adore the Alan Parsons Project. And you know, Parsons is a huge game changer in electronic music himself, being the first producer and engineer to make a name for himself in the public eye, I think. Like, you see producers getting big on the pop charts all the time nowadays, but in the 70s, you never saw that. And Alan Parsons is a game changer in that regard. And either way, the project's albums are always super well constructed, and of course it is this science fiction themed second effort from them that is my personal favorite. I mean, everything from the Alan Parsons Project is worth your time, even if this is the only one that I would consider electronic. Number 14. The Future Sound of London, Lifeforms. Accelerator has the nostalgia power, the ISNES has the immense attention to detail and childhood pandering, but Lifeforms combines everything I've ever liked about FSOL and electro-ambient music in general. Listening to this album is like exploring an alien planet, so absolutely vast and full of weirdness that I can still listen to this album and discover new passages I never even noticed before. It's their most well-received album ever, and I gotta agree with the majority opinion on this one. Number 13. The Orb. The Orb's Adventures Beyond the Ultraworld. Lifeforms may be like exploring an alien planet, but The Orb's Adventures Beyond the Ultraworld is like taking off from the Earth's surface, orbiting the moon, shooting across the outer reaches of the galaxy, and then exploring an alien planet. All the space and science fiction imagery is very strong with this one, and one that remains just as captivating as ever after years of listening the crap out of it. It's most people's favorite Orb album, and it's my favorite too. Number 12. Orbital. Orbital 2, or the Brown Album. I'm just gonna put this out there right now. Halcyon and on, specifically the version from this album, is without exaggeration my favorite song of all time, and has been since 2007. Of course, there is an album surrounding my favorite song of all time, and is just as solid and even fits perfectly together, only augmenting the experience. I mean, it may not be a perfect album to put out, but it's a shining example of why Orbital is my favorite band, and Halcyon is just the tip of the iceberg. Number 11. Sounds from the Ground, Mosaic and Terra Firma. That's not a tie, those are the same album. I've already mentioned this band has helped define my life and musical taste, and while I respect them more for their consistently remaining in the 8 range for basically their entire career, I still have to acknowledge the standouts in their catalog. This album, their follow-up to Kin, is not only way better in basically every way, but also spreads out its chill-out awesomeness over all its songs, with mysterious vibes and dub elements more consistently engaging and thought-provoking than ever. There's also 2 different versions of this album too, Mosaic and Terra Firma, but I say you can flip a coin on which one to check out. Both of them are worth your time, I think, even though the 2 versions have 7 tracks in common. Number 10. Hybrid. Disappear Here. Many consider this to be one of Hybrid's weakest albums, but for me, the emotional power is real, and augmented by all of Hybrid's fantastic and dark and cinematic atmospherics, cranked up to 11 here. Like, I love Hybrid, but this belongs in my top 10 for sure. I don't know an album that is so good at getting me to spontaneously sing along with every track on it. Well, that is, except for... Number 9. BT, These Hopeful Machines. BT may sound somewhat similar to other trance producers like Armin van Buuren and Tiesto, but he is on a level so far above them that those two will never be able to come even close to reaching. BT goes out of his way to make the process of making music more difficult for him to make, and shoves in an unbelievable amount of love and effort into every second of music he produces. The attention to detail in just any single song on this album is more than Armin had in all 6 of his albums combined. and the emotional power is almost overwhelming as well. BT can make a track that just goes, I love you, I love you, I love you, today is the day I love you, and make them feel like they have so much depth and sincerity in them just with his top-notch production. BT is seriously one of the greatest names in all of electronic music, and this isn't even his highest ranked album on this list. Number 8. Air, Moon Safari. Yeah, I suppose with my having reviewed their discography, these guys probably should have popped up more often, but oh well. Air are a band that thrive on nostalgia vibes, and having discovered them at the same time as Orbital, i.e. when I was in 5th grade, the nostalgia power should have been intense enough as it is. While Moon Safari isn't the deepest of albums, it is one that takes advantage of every emotional moment that it can. One of the best chill-out albums ever, and one that is fully embedded into my life. Number 7. Air, 10,000 Hertz Legend. Don't be lost. Whether this album surpasses Moon Safari or barely trails behind it admittedly depends on my mood, but for right now, it's in the lead as my favorite Air album. Moon Safari may not be deep, but 10,000 Hertz Legend very much is. Taking every turn and risk it can, purely to show listeners that they're more than just your average easy listening outfit, and can make something truly challenging and thought-provoking, one that thoroughly and lavishly rewards the repeat listener. Every song on here is a masterpiece in and of itself, showing Air pushing themselves as far as they can possibly go out of their comfort zone, but not to the point of sounding like a different band. All the respect in the world for these guys for this album. Number 6. Sounds from the Ground, Luminal. SFTG may have mastered the art of dub techno with Mosaic and Terra Firma, but they've made very sure to never get stuck in a rut or release the same album twice, having crossed over so many styles ranging from trip-hop to IDM, and basically all of it plays some part in their 4th album, Here. The 9 songs on this album show off the great variety that SFTG are capable of, but still feel like they belong together, and on top of that provide a chill-out experience 10 times more potent than even Smoker's Delight. It's my go-to album for whenever I just need to clear my head and relax, and has only gotten better every time I hear it. Certainly my favorite work for my favorite chill-out duo. Number 5. Hybrid, Wide Angle. Okay, by this point we have basically reached a point at which I might consider giving out 10s, but I'm still deciding if they're truly worthy. Wide Angle is an album that lives up to its name, with the sound of a breakbeat techno-trance album with orchestras added on top, but the lasting effect of a Future Sound of London album, completely immersing you in its atmosphere that sounds like it comes out of a science fiction movie, like a bright city from 100 years into the future. And that's not even to mention the emotional power, which, as to be expected out of Hybrid, is absolutely out of this world, with every individual song being highly memorable, even the weakest tracks, and the intro. This is an album that I'd like to live inside, if that were even possible. Number 4. 808 State, Don Solaris. I did say that 808 State got better with each progressive album, and for me, this was their peak. 808 State were usually pretty silly and meandering, but on this album, they were interestingly focused. Well, at least within each individual song. At least most of the songs on the album stuck to the point more than usual. Although the album as a whole is all over the place mood-wise. There's some chill-out tracks, some up-tempo and even drum and bass tracks, some poppy songs, some whacked-out experimental ones too. But I absolutely love every single one of them. Once again, nostalgia plays heavily into this, as I discovered 808 State really early on, back in middle school. at the same time as mathematics, incidentally, but it's just as impressive now as it was for the middle schooler me. Number 3. The Avalanches, Since I Left You.
Get a drink, have a good time now. Welcome to paradise, 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 paradise.
Here we are in the final stretch, the 3 albums that I've heard that I know for a fact are deserving of 10 out of 10 ratings from me. This one being the only one of the 3 I've actually reviewed as of right now. But yeah, this is the best sample-based album I've ever heard. The way that all 18 songs perfectly flow into one another as one cohesive whole, but still highly enjoyable from an individual song perspective. The overabundance of feel-good vibes and emotion, the fact that I've been listening to this album so much and yet still keep getting new things out of it with more repeat listens, but still absolutely loved it on first listen. Just nothing to say here that I haven't already said. Number 2. BT, This Binary Universe. I already talked about how BT is so far ahead of his colleagues, who are usually classified along with him, like Armin and Tiesto, but while comparing BT to his contemporaries further shows how awesome he is, my favorite mode of BT is when you can't compare him to anybody in the first place, which is exactly what this binary universe is. This album is BT crossing so many boundaries of electronic music, from IDM to ambient to soundtrack to jazz to rock to whatever. The 7 songs on this album are very abstract and strange, stuff that's not easy to wrap your head around, but is also emotionally charged as well. BT pouring his heart and soul into every stutter edit, synth sequence, and instrumental performance. The last track, Good Morning Kaya, is even a love letter to his then baby daughter. This album is simply mind-blowing, showing off everything that defines BT as an artist and a person. Only one album I've ever heard in my lifetime tops this for me, and that album is number 1. 256 Spy Spiral Out of Control. Okay, just kidding. Orbital Insides. Yeah, big surprise, right? My favorite album from my favorite band. This album delivers on basically everything I enjoy in electronic music. Fantastic melodies? Check. Well-balanced variety? Check. Everything fitting together as one cohesive whole? Check. Amazing attention to detail that rewards repeat listens, even now? Check. A subtle environmental message that serves as an overarching theme? Check, even if the subtlety disappears if you read the liner notes. Lots of childhood nostalgia? Check. And finally, Paul and Phil Hartnell? Check. I used to think if this album had a weakness, it was that I had a least favorite track at all, but I don't think even that criticism applies, as the track that I'd have picked for that spot, Petrol, has also been growing on me immensely as of like the past couple of months or so. I've had my on and off periods on lots of different bands, but Orbital haven't left my listening rotation since I discovered them a decade ago. They've helped me through hard times, and continue to be just as fantastic today as they were back in the old days. So it's only fitting that they occupy the number 1 spot on my list. But of course, this is just my opinion, you can feel free to disagree with it, but I'd like to hear your thoughts. So leave the comments in the comment thing down there, but yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all for today.